Masechet Nazir Daf Mem Chet. We're dealing with the permission of a Nazir and a Kohen Gadol to become Tameh Lamet for a Met Mitzvah. We asked yesterday, what's the source? And so we already dealt with the source for a Kohen Gadol, because it says, Al Kol Nafshot Met Lo Yavo. That's a general rule that teaches us that he cannot become Tameh to anyone, not even close relatives. And therefore, the next words, Ul Aviv, is extraneous. So what do we need Laviv for? I already know that a Kohen Gadol cannot become Tameh for his father. Oh, so that comes to teach us Met Mitzvah. All right, so that's how we learned Met Mitzvah regarding a Kohen Gadol. Ashkechan Kohen Gadol, Nazir Minalan, but now what about a source for a Nazir? Detanya. And so now we're going to have a long baraita. We're going to see overall two general strategies. First from the Rabbi Ishmael, and then from Rabbi Akiva. So the one for Rabbi Ishmael will have a lot of back and forths to prove it. Rabbi Akiva also. So this will take up the entire daf. Detanya, Kol Yemei Haziro LaHashem Al Nefesh Met Lo Yavo. So this is a general statement about Nazir. As long as he is a Nazir, he cannot become Tameh to Nefesh Met. Now, what does that mean? Shomei ani afilu nefesh behema b'mashma. Kinyan shene'emar makeh nefesh behema. I might think, just from this pasuk, that it means that he cannot become tameh, not even but from an animal, from a dead animal, a nevela, that he's not allowed to touch and become tameh lamet for even an animal. After all, an animal is also called nefesh. You see here, makeh nefesh behema, and if someone kills an animal. So maybe nefesh here also means that nefesh met, a Nazir cannot touch a dead animal. Tamud lomad al nefesh met lo yavo benefesh adam hakatuv medaber. No, regarding Nazir, it says nefesh met, and these two words together only refer to a human being. Okay, so now we know that we don't have to deal with animal carcasses that would be tameh or anything like that. Live animals are never become tameh anyway. Okay, so now we know we're dealing with human beings. Fine. Now, Rabbi Ishmael Omer, Eno sarich, harehu Omer, lo yavo ben nefashot metameot b'biyah katuv medaber. Rabbi Ishmael says, I don't need this complicated derivation here, that it's not talking about animals but only humans, because it doesn't say nefesh met rather than nefesh. I can learn it from the words lo yavo. Lo yavo means do not enter. Well, what kind of tum'ah do you get from entering into a tent? Well, that's only for a human corpse. What does one get to become tameh of tent impurity? Animal impurity is not received by entering a tent, and therefore Lo Yavos teaches that the Nazir is only prohibited from becoming tameh for people who, for whom there is tent impurity when they enter into the tent. So that's how he derives it. Okay, so now we have two different ways of deriving that. A Nazir is only prohibited for human tum'ah, but not for dead animals. All right, so now let's keep going. Laviv ulimo eno mitameh, ava mitamehu lemet misva. Oh, here's derivation number one. We're going to end up rejecting this, but for now, so since it says father and mother, Nazir cannot become tameh. But don't we know this already? No, actually, we don't know this already, right? Because all we proved so far was that he cannot become tameh to human beings. But what type of human beings? Relatives, non-relatives? We didn't really clarify that yet. But assuming we know relatives already, Laviv ulimo is extraneous, and therefore it teaches us that only for close relatives a Nazir cannot become tameh, but he can become tameh if he needs to take care of a met mitzvah. All right, so far so good. But now we're going to question this. Ad shelo yomad yesh li badin, and say, I don't even need this laviv ulimo. I can learn the law of met mitzvah from a kal vachomer. Uma kohen gadol shekedushato kedushat olam mit tameh lemet mitzvah. Nazir she'en kedushato kedushat olam and odin shemit tameh lemet mitzvah. We already just above learn that a Kohen Gadol can become tameh for a met mitzvah. Now, if that's true for a Kohen Gadol who is holy forever, for his entire life, and Kiddushat Olam, well, as a regular Kohen forever, and then it becomes Kohen Gadol, and his Kehuna, Kiddusha, is forever, and yet he can become Tameh for a Met Misvah. Nazir, which is not forever, it's just for a given time period. All the more so, he should be permitted to become Tameh for a Met Mitzvah. So I can learn it from a Kal Vachomer. Why do I need this derivation, Laviv Ulimo? And we answer, no, this Kal Vachomer is not valid. Lo, im amarta bekohen gadol sheken eno mevi korban al tumato, tuma benazir she'embi korban al tumato, ho'il mevi korban al tumato, lo yitameh lemet mitzvah. Tamod lomad, Laviv Ulimo lo yitama, aval mitameh lemet mitzvah. If you say regarding a Kohen Gadol, he can become Tameh for a Met Mitzvah because if a Kohen or Kohen Gadol becomes Tameh, they don't have to bring a Korban. Can we apply that to a Nazir who has to bring a Korban? If he becomes Tameh Lamet, he brings 3 Korbanot, he goes all the way back to the beginning. Oh, so it's because a Nazir because a Nazir has to bring Korbanot if he becomes Tameh, so it's more severe, and therefore we would assume that he cannot become Tameh for a Met Mitzvah, based on this Kal Vachomer. So the Kal Vachomer does not work. Therefore, I need to learn it from the words Laviv Ulimo. To them, he cannot become Tameh, but yes, he does become Tameh to a Met Mitzvah. Okay, so now we revived this derivation, but now we're going to reject it once again. Wait, maybe it means that he cannot become tameh to his father and mother, but maybe he can become tameh to all other people that are not as close relatives. Maybe that could make some sense because his father and mother he's all very sad about, and maybe that's why, so he can't be so aggrieved. But if it's not a relative, then he won't feel so emotional. So maybe maybe it means that. No, amarta Kal Vachomer, ma kohen hediot shemitameh lakerubim eno mitameh lishar metim, nazir she'eno mitameh lakerubim eno din shelo yitameh lishar metim. That wouldn't make sense. Look at a regular kohen who can become tameh for close relatives, but not for non-relatives. So a nazir who cannot become tameh for close relatives, right? Certainly not for father and mother. All the more so cannot become tameh for non-relatives. So therefore, I cannot learn from the words La'aviv Ulimo that it's only La'aviv Ulimo, but a Nazir could become tameh for non-relatives. That wouldn't make any sense because it's exactly the opposite for a regular Kohen. So Matamud Lomad La'aviv Ulimo hu de la mitameh, aval mitameh hu lemet misvah. So we go back to our original derivation. The words Aviv and Imo are extraneous to teach me that the Nazir can not become Tameh to Aviv, to his parents, but he can become Tameh for a Met Mitzvah. Okay, good. So now we're back. We're going to question it again. Ad shelo yomar yesh li badin. Nemru kalalot bekohen gadol, nemru kalalot benazir. Ma kalalot amurat bekohen gadol. Aviv eno mitameh, ava mitameh lemet misvah. Av kalalot amurat benazir, leaviv eno mitameh, ava mitameh lemet misvah. Why don't I learn it just from a comparison from the language of Kohen Gadol? Regarding a Kohen Gadol, it says, Al kol nafshot met lo yavo. That was the klalot. That was the general rule for a Kohen Gadol. And when we were talking about Kohen Gadol, we said, the klal teaches me that he cannot become tameh to anyone, not even close relatives. But then for Kohen Gadol, it adds le'aviv. The words le'aviv there comes to add that, his father he can't, but he can for Met Mitzvah. So from Kohen Gadol, we already have the klal, and then the word after that, le'aviv, teaches me that yes, he can become become tameh for Met Mitzvah. That's for Kohen Gadol. And so now let's compare that language to a Nazir, where also it says almost the same language, nefesh met, al nefesh met lo yavo. So that generality also is going to include, yes, all people, including close relatives, but he can become tameh for a met mitzvah. So therefore I can learn it simply from a verbal comparison to Kohen Gadol, and I don't need the derivation of Laviv Ulimo regarding Nazir. So that sounds like it would be good. Here's the problem. O kelach lederech zo, nemru kalot bekohen hediot, v'nemru kalalot benazir. Ma kalalot amurot bekohen hediot, mitameh le'aviv, av kalalot amurot benazir, mitameh le'aviv. But how do you know you should compare Nazir to a Kohen Gadol? You could also compare Nazir to a regular Kohen, for whom it says, Lenefesh lo yitama be'amav. A regular Kohen cannot become Tameh. And that's also a general rule. It cannot become Tameh to non-relatives. And if I made the connection, the comparison between Nazir and a regular Kohen, I would say just like a regular Kohen can become Tameh for his father and close relatives, so to a Nazir can become Tameh for his close relatives. And see that, so how do you know I should compare it to Nazir to Kohen Gadol, and therefore permit met mitzvah? Maybe I should compare it to a regular Kohen, and then permit even close relatives. Tamod omar, laviv ulimo lo yitama, halemet mitzvah mitameh. So that's why you see that derivation is ambiguous. And then we're going to go back to our original derivation for Nazir. It says of his father and mother, and that's extraneous, and that teaches me that met mitzvah, he is permitted. Only for a father and mother he cannot become tameh. He can become tameh for a met mitzvah. Okay, so we're back to our good derivation. Now we're going to interrupt this baraita and say, hold on, this step here did not make sense. Wait a second. We need the pasuk regarding Nazir just to teach me that a Nazir cannot become Tameh for his father, right? I mean, look at this. We just said that we're not sure if we should compare Nazir to a Kohen Gadol or to a regular Kohen. So if you're not sure what to do about that, then that means you need to know that a Nazir cannot become Tameh for close relatives. So actually, Aviv and Imo are not extraneous for a Nazir. We need them to teach the law of close relatives itself. Ela le'aviv lomar she'en mitameh le'aviv. So for the father, we need that just to teach about that a Nazir cannot become tameh to a father and all similar close relatives. Okay, ule'achiv eno mitameh ha lemet misva mitameh. Okay, so instead, where are we going to learn the met misva law? From le'achiv. Also said regarding Nazir. Regarding Nazir, it gives a list of all the close relatives, and so we use Aviv for itself for the father and other close relatives. We're going to use the word Achiv to teach me that Nazir cannot become Tameh for Achiv, but he can for a Met Misvah. So this is now the new derivation. We're not learning it from Laviv Ulimo anymore, but rather from Achiv. Ulimo ligezera shava lichdirabi. What are you going to do with mother? For a Nazir, that teaches me Gezah Shavah, that Rabbi said. He mentioned it yesterday. There, Rabbi said, how do you know that a Nazir, he cannot become Tameh Lamet, but he can become Tameh Mesorah or a Zav. If he has someone, a relative, a friend, anyone who's a Zav or Mesorah, and the Nazir wants to help him out, and then is going to go and touch him or give him something and become Tameh thereby, that's permitted. So we learn that from the word Ul Immo. Well, that's only tumat met, but other types of tuma and nazir is permitted. So that we're using. Now, uvela achoto, we talked about father and mother and brother, but what about sister? That said regarding nazir. Lechet detanya lachoto matamodlomar haresh alach lishot et pischo velambulet beno veshama shemet lomet yachol yitame amarta lo yitame. This is to teach me another rule that actually has nothing to do with nazir. But we have an extra word here, so let's make good use of it. If a person, anyone, it could be a Nazir, it could be not a Nazir, is going to do Korban Pesach, right? It's time, it's the afternoon of Erev Pesach, and he has to go bring Korban Pesach. Or he had a son, and it's the 8th day, and he has to go and do Brit Milah for his son. And then, just then, he hears that a relative of his died. So what should he do? Should he become Tameh Lamet? This is a problem, because if he goes and becomes Tameh Lamet, then he won't be able to bring his Korban Pesach, and he won't have time to go ahead and do the Brit Milah. And so he's got to pick one or the other, either take care of his close relative or perform a mitzvah of Pesach and Brit Milah. Why these two mitzvot specifically? Because these are two mitzvot that if you don't do them, one gets karet. These are only two mitzvot aseh that if you don't do them, you get karet. So these are serious mitzvot. What's the answer? Lo yitameh. He does not need to become tameh, even for his close relative. He can go ahead and do his Korban Pesach or his Brit Milah. Now, יכול לא יטמא למת מצווה, תלמוד לומר לאחותו. לאחותו הוא דאינו מטמא, הלמת מצווה מטמא. Now, what if he's going to do Korban Pesach or do Brit Milah, and on the road he sees a met mitzvah? Just ignore it and go do your mitzvah? No, that's going too far. That's why the pasuk says la'achoto, that only for his relative, this kind of person does not become tameh, but he must become tameh for a met mitzvah. And so, even though this has nothing to do with a nazir, the word achoto is an extra word. Imeno inyan. If we don't use it for its current context, we'll use it for a different context. And so that's what we do with the word achoto. Okay, so that's how we derive everything according to Rabbi Yishmael. We can review how he uses every word. All right, Rabbi Ishmael said, "Al nefesh met lo yavo." From here, we learned that a nazir cannot become tameh lamet for a human, but it's okay for an animal. And then le'aviv. From here, we learn that he cannot become tameh lamet, not even for a close relative. Right, that was the aviv. From imo, we learn that he can't become tameh lamet, but he can become tameh for a zav or a mesorah. From the word le'achiv, we learned that a nazir can become tameh for a met mitzvah. So this is the main thing we've been looking for this whole time, right? This is it, met mitzvah, nazir, from the word achiv. And finally, from achoto, we learned the law that of someone doing a mitzvah aseh of Pesach and Brit Milah, nevertheless has to interrupt their big mitzvah in order to take care of a met mitzvah. All right, so that concludes Rabbi Yishmael. But now Rabbi Akiva, how is he go? Where is he going to derive the law of a met mitzvah? And he does things a little bit differently. Rabbi Akiva Omer, nafshot elu harechokin, met elu akirobin, le'aviv ul'imo eno mitame, ava mitame hu lemet mitzvah. And Rabbi Ishmael learns from the word nafshot, that's non-relatives. Nazir cannot become tameh. From the word met, that includes relatives. So you see, Rabbi Ishmael is willing to parse it, not just into phrases, but even to individual words. And so he knows from somewhere else that it's not animals, he's not dealing with that. And therefore, he already knows relatives. And that leaves the aviv ulimot to be extraneous. So that teaches me that he can become tameh for a met mitzvah. Okay, he uses two words for this for some reason. Then, now he goes on. Le'achiv, she'im haya kohen gadol vehu nazir, le'achiv eno mitameh, ava mitameh hu lemet mitzvah. So now, achiv, what is he going to do with it? This is to teach me another law, that if someone has a double whammy, he's kohen gadol and a nazir, he has two prohibitions against becoming tameh lamet. So, that person cannot become tameh for a close relative, but can become tameh for a met mitzvah. So even though he has both, he still has to take care of the met mitzvah. And לאחותו כדתניא, הרי שהיה הולך לשחוט את פסחו ולמול את בנו. Rabbi Akiva uses the word achoto for the same thing that Rabbi Ishmael does, that if a person is going to do Pesach or Brit Milah and he sees a met mitzvah, he is permitted to become tameh lemet mitzvah and neglect his Korban Pesach or the Brit Milah. That's Rabbi Akiva. Okay, now a follow-up question to Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva, Gezerah Shava de Rabbi Minaleh. Rabbi Akiva, where are you going to learn that Gezerah Shava that Rabbi taught? And Rabbi taught, if you remember, from the word imo, and that's what Rabbi Ishmael used it for, that le'imo teaches that he cannot become tameh lamet, a nazir, but he can become tameh for a zav or mesorah. And then earlier at the end, earlier on this stuff that we did yesterday, we learned the Gezerah Shava from Nazir to Kohen Gadol, that a Kohen Gadol also has the same law, cannot become tameh lamet, but can become tameh for a zav or for a mesorah, and we learned it from ul imo over there regarding the Kohen Gadol. Now here's the problem. According to you, Rabbi Akiva, you are learning from Le'aviv ul imo, the law of met mitzvah. And so now it's not extraneous, it's not available to use for a gezerah shava. So where are you going to learn this law from? For Nazir and the gezerah shava to Kohen Gadol. And his answer is, Amar la kevan damar mod, im haya Kohen Gadol ve Nazir, la'achiv eno mitameh, aval mitameh hu lemet mitzvah, mali Kohen Gadol lechudeh, mali Nazir ve Kohen Gadol. So Rabbi Akiva is going to go back to the achiv and say, what do we learn from the word achiv? That for a person who's a Kohen Gadol and a Nazir, they can become tameh for a met mitzvah. But really, what's the difference if he is just a Kohen Gadol or both a Nazir and a Kohen Gadol? It's really the same thing. Once you say that met mitzvah is so important that it overrides one of them, then certainly, then I can assume it'll override both of them. So therefore, really all I need is the word le'achiv. And that teaches me both or either one, Nazir and or Kohen Gadol, met mitzvah overrides. And since I already know that, that leaves la'aviv ul imo, especially ul imo, to be extraneous, and I can use it for Nazir and for gezerah shava to Kohen Gadol, and thereby learn that both Nazir and Kohen Gadol can become tameh for a zav and a mesorah. All right, that concludes Rabbi Akiva. And now back to Rabbi Ishmael. Rabbi Ishmael, Kohen Gadol vehu Nazir minaleh. Rabbi Ishmael, where are you going to learn this law that we just got from Rabbi Akiva, that if someone has a double Kohen Gadol and a Nazir, that he can become tameh for met mitzvah? And his answer is, Kevan deshra rachamana had lav gabe met mitzvah, mali had lav mali teren lavin. So he says, I also think it's logical, as Rabbi Akiva himself just said, once the Torah permits one prohibition for met mitzvah, meaning either Nazir or Kohen Gadol, what's the difference, one or two? The point is, we learned that met mitzvah is of supreme importance, and if it can override one or other of the prohibitions, then we can assume it also will override two, and I don't need a special derivation for this. Okay, good. Now, achoto lamali. Wait, based on that, once you just told me that met mitzvah is so important that it overrides even two serious prohibitions, then can I also assume that it will override mitzvat aseh? And therefore, I don't need achoto to teach me that the person doing Pesach and Brit Milah should become tameh for met mitzvah. So why do I need achoto? And the answer is Salkada Techamina Kishara Lachamana lemet mitzvah Nazir veKohen Gadol Nazir veKohen Tisur lavehu Aval Milah Pesach dekaret lo yitameh lemet mitzvah kamash malan. Now, because I might have thought there is a difference when the Torah permits a met mitzvah for a Nazir and a Kohen, that's because it's a Yisur Lav. But Milah and Pesach are mitzvot aseh that get karet, and I might think that's actually even more stringent and would not need to become, and could not become tameh for met mitzvah. Therefore, we need achoto to teach me that as well. That not only for these isurei lav and even two isurei lav, but also for a mitzvat aseh that gets karet if you don't do it. Nevertheless, met mitzvah. I think the main conclusion is met mitzvah trumps everything, right? And to leave a body desecrated is a terrible thing, and therefore you stop any mitzvah and you violate whatever you need to in order to take care of that body that has no one else to bury it. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen ve'amen.